Today I'm visiting the site of the Pink Palace, which was the offices for the Tahoe Ice Company, which started in 1886. In view right now is Polaris, and that's one of the biggest ice farms on the Truckee River and still beautifully intact. So this is what the Chinese created after they finished with the railroad, China Wall and some of those, and here amazing rock work. Used to be a bridge. As you look across right here, you can see a ramp leading down to the river, and then there would have been a bridge across the river right there. And storage buildings on the other side of the river for ice, and then storage facilities on this side of the river for ice. And then the Pink Palace, which was covered with pink asbestos, became known as the Pink Palace, and it was the office for the ice company. But if you ever come out here, you'll see that the dam that was created, there's a walkway on top that you can walk, and it's easily a quarter-mile long on top of that rock work. Incredible. Truckee River bike path on the other side of the river also. Actually, they call it the Tahoe Pyramid Bike Trail, Bikeway. You can see some rock piles here. Once the building burned, then they just demolished the remains and pushed them over the river edge. And here you can see some of the old blocks. These would have been part of the roundhouse, Truckee Roundhouse. And if you look, they're soot covered on one side. So amazing. But anyways, cut stone, and then perhaps some other just general stone for foundation. Popular fishing area. As we get closer to the edge, you can see the extent of the rock work as it stretches upriver. With building area flat on the other side of the river there. And then here, as you look around, you'll see pink asbestos shingle or siding that they would use. And of course, nowadays, not allowed. This is some of the debris that was pushed over the edge. And a beautiful flat out here. So the bridge, if you look right there next to the river, is a footing and one of the posts still standing from when the original bridge was there. And then there's a wire cable on the other side that you can't see. And then that, from there, they would have gone over in that direction there, and you can just see where there's some disturbed earth, and that's the ramp going up on top here to the railroad level. Because with the railroad right here, of course, they wanted to have the convenience of loading ice. As we move along the edge of the bluff here, you can start to see some of the other additional debris. Bricks, old square rebar, Lots of purple glass, extensive debris. People think it's a junk or a dump, and it's just stuff essentially was just left where it was, and eventually buildings collapsed or burned. Here you can see one of the retaining walls that would have supported the ice storage. So they had extensive capabilities to store ice for years by packing it in sawdust. Overgrown now, but the vestiges of an old road are still out here, but getting harder and harder to find. One of the businesses here was a box crate manufacturer. So they would make the crates that then they would ship down to the valley, load up with produce, and then on the way back, they would pick up ice for the return trip back east. But as you look around here, there's immense quantity of thin strips of wood, which was left over from making crates where they wanted long, thin strips of wood. I think up here is just a faint hint of the old road, and even that's, like I said, getting harder and harder. Woo! Little bit of debris. People will, of course, that's a modern day screw cap, but little bits of debris. As you go along, you'll see, you'll pass by patches of household or common debris, glass, metal, where there was perhaps a homestead or a business. Kind of meandering a little bit here, but again, you can see old wood that's beginning to decompose. This has got a famous bend in the Truckee River, which was caused by an earthquake causing a slippage of the earth and creating a right-hand bend in the river. So it goes through a distinct bend, and it's transmitted. It's hard to see here in the hillside up above that there's a little bit of a notch that was, I guess, the original fault. Who knows? Old fork, perhaps. Could be modern day. Plenty of people. Plenty of old debris too. Punch cans, when you start seeing punch cans that have been punched with a knife or some other instrument, then you know that before can openers. Or before can openers were commonplace. Anytime you see a large rock like this one straight ahead, you know that hasn't been moved, and the ground around it hasn't been disturbed. And you can see the debris field is extensive. It's not a dump, it's just what was left over after all the activity was through. There's one area here where you'd find a lot of Band-Aid tins. So they were old tins that contained Band-Aids. So I assume that was the first aid, a Band-Aid. Here you can see a big rock. Prehistoric flooding that was artificially created by ice, and that eventually had failed and allowed an intense volume of water to wash down the canyon at some point. Here is where the railroad grade, or I believe it was a small railroad grade, would have come up from the river, and the bridge crossing would have been just right there. So then they would have just moved the ice up to here and then stored it. And they said they could store the ice for years. Lots of purple glass here, old real estate signs. This, of course, was a scene of intense activity because it's at this junction of the bluff and the pathway up from the river after crossing the bridge, so it was a throughway. Here you can just see littered with tin cans, and a little closer view of the railroad grade as it comes up. And of course there was no trash service, so after they emptied the contents of a can, they would just roast them on the fire and then toss them aside. So that would have kept the critters and varmints at bay by simply roasting the cans out and removing all the food. And I haven't seen any good pictures of this section of the river, even though the Pink Palace is pretty famous. at least with locals, because it was still standing. It hasn't been that long since it's faded away. Square nails. We're almost to where the ramp comes up the Truckee River, from the Truckee River. And so this would get them up on the flat next to the railroad grade. And then they could load ice up as needed. So, plenty of storage. The ground is just littered with charcoal from previous fires, I assume, and just general debris that's eroded away. Plenty of bits of steel, pottery. Classic scene here, though. Barrel hoops. When you look this way with the sun, you can just see the sparkles of all the broken glass. So again, and out this way, looking towards the river and the railroad grade that would have come from where the river crossing was. Beautiful day.